The National Park Service is sometimes overlooked or taken for granted in the U.S. Over 282 million people a year visit the wonderful places our founders created. Places like Yellowstone, the Statue of Liberty, the Grand Canyon, Yosemite, and even right here in Wisconsin, we can enjoy the parks. The National Park Service just turned 100 years old, and we cannot thank the Founding Fathers enough for what they have done through hard work and sacrifice. Once in a while, stop and think about it. Have other countries taken the same approach? Countries in Africa, Asia, and Europe are experiencing horrific environmental problems, extinction of wildlife, and lots of pollution. How did America have the vision and courage to stand up and preserve these great places for future generations?
The National Park Service, founded in 1916, preserved many pieces of wildlife and helped reduce environmental problems in the U.S. Individuals like John Muir, Theodore Roosevelt, Stephen Mather, and Horace Albright set the groundwork for the National Park Service, even though the general public was against it. Due to their vision, hard work, and sacrifice, the National Park Service system is now the envy of the world and laid the foundation for today's current environmental movement.
John Muir was raised in Wisconsin and from a young age was a natural-born scientist and loved the outdoors. So when James Hutchings offered him a job at the Hutchings House in Yosemite, Muir did not pass the offer up. Every free moment he had, he was outside at Yosemite. From 1785 to 1886, the government gave away thousands of acres to public land to companies who were going to build. Muir saw this and fought against how people were misusing the land. Muir felt like the wildlife was necessary to preserve and make the forests what they once were. John Muir discussed his ideas with Robert Johnson, who was a diplomat and author. Johnson persuaded Muir to write 2 articles about Yosemite and protecting the wildlife. Then Johnson would present the 2 articles to the Congress of the U.S. As a result, 4 of the first national parks were made: Yellowstone, Yosemite, Sequoia, and General Grant National Park.
In 1903, Muir received a letter from Theodore Roosevelt saying that he supported his ideas and feelings about forest preservation and wanted to talk to him. So as a result, Muir and Roosevelt went on a camping trip into the Sierras in Yosemite National Park, California. Roosevelt said to Muir, "I do not want anyone with me but you, and I want to drop politics absolutely for 4 days and just be out in the open with you." After the 4 days were over, everybody knew John Muir and what he stood for. With the public interest of conservation, Robert Johnson suggested a club should be formed.
The club was called the Sierra Club. The Sierra Club is an environmental organization in the United States. It was founded on May 28, 1892 in San Francisco, California by John Muir, who became its first president. The original members at first thought of it as an outing club, but then they were soon to realize that they could have an impact on the protection of wildlife. The first success of the Sierra Club was that the club started recording the names of the people who went mountain climbing. They kept track of who was on the mountain at the same time, and whether these adventures got lost or not. By 1903, the club had grown enough to have an office building in San Francisco. Then in 1909, after the San Francisco earthquake had happened, the Sierra Club was growing again. Members were now volunteering their time to build trails in the High Sierra. This began a Sierra Club tradition of keeping the trails of all the national parks in good condition for hiking.
The Sierra Club today has become a watchdog of the environment. In fact, one of the main reasons that the National Park Service was formed was because of Sierra Club urging Congress. In 1939, 1959, 1961, and 1964, the Sierra Club put an end to matters that were going to damage or destroy the national parks. The club also urged the U.S. government to sign several acts to help the environment. The Sierra Club did various acts toward the environment, including stopping the pollution in Lake Superior, establishing many wilderness areas, stopping highways from being built on National Park Service land, and establishing U.S. policies to protect the Antarctic environment. The Sierra Club also was the leader in establishing the National Park Service's Legal Defense Fund. This means that if any companies or individuals want to build on the land that the National Park Service owns, they cannot. There is now a permanent branch of the Sierra Club in Washington, D.C. There, people keep up with current events that could threaten or damage wilderness.
Stephen Mather was a wealthy Chicago businessman and the first director of the National Park Service. He made his fortune in borax mining. Born in 1867, he possessed political skills and an easy manner with the rich and powerful. His enthusiasm for the parks was unbounded, and he spent much of his money defending them from critics who said they were at best expensive irrelevancies, and at worst communist enclaves. During his 14 years as director, Mather developed, promoted, and popularized parks with new roads, facilities, and concessionary services. His enduring goal was to increase public enjoyment. He died in 1930, the year after he resigned.
What amenities that the parks offer do you use?
We have used campgrounds in many of the parks. We have used hiking trails. We've used bicycle paths. We've used the waterways, canoeing and kayaking on lakes. We've used the ranger services for guides. We've used the park headquarters and for the displays and buildings to be learning about the parks. We have used Denali has bus trips that take you past where the roads go so that you can, and it was a ranger-led tour that we actually took, which was really interesting. It was about a 5-hour trip out into the mountain in Denali. So all those things are great amenities that we've used in the parks.
Owners forced Stephen Mather into a leave of absence as director of the National Park Service. Horace Albright took charge. Unlike Mather, Albright was not a millionaire. A graduate of Georgetown University Law School, he served as director of the National Park Service from 1929 until 1933, and in that time he doubled the number of areas managed by the agency. To avoid a takeover by the Forest Service, he expanded the Park Service into historical battlefields and monuments, most of them in the East, giving his agency more responsibility and visibility. In his last 50 years, he became a patriarch and spokesman for the National Park Service.
And it's a lot of grassroots driven. That means people like you and me and just folks who really care about having a National Park Service area in Wisconsin, having great hiking in Wisconsin. So there's thousands of volunteers who come out every year and help maintain and expand the Ice Age Trail.
So what the national parks mean to me is a lot of things. One of them is sharing, and the fact that national parks and all public wild places are pretty much welcome to everybody, and anyone can go there. So it's kind of a great way that we are reminded that we can share with each other. And share beautiful places. And the second thing I would say is they represent values of humility and respect. Respect for other living things besides our own species and our own selves, and that other plants and animals have equal right and equal footing to be here on this earth. And so we need to make a place for them to live.
The future of the National Park Service and other departments of protecting the environment are influenced by presidential elections and congressional priorities. It is important that U.S. citizens continue on the work that John Muir started in protecting the wildlife, land, and environment.
In conclusion, the National Park Service helped preserve many pieces of wildlife and helped reduce many environmental problems. The individuals mentioned in this project fought to protect the parks even though the public was against it. The National Park Service is the foundation for the world's current environmental movement.